Stephen Lawrence Cooley is an American politician and prosecutor. He was the Los Angeles County District Attorney from 2002 to 2012. Cooley was reelected in 2004 and again in 2008. In 2010, Cooley won the Republican nomination for California Attorney General against John Eastman and Tom Harmon in the June 8th primary election. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Marina Kufa, and I have a very special guest today, Mr. Steve Cooley, who is a former district attorney of Los Angeles. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. So district attorney, it is so important, and we would like to know, maybe you tell us a little bit about yourself and why is this so important for people to vote for the right district attorney?
The district attorney is an office that has to be established in every county in the state of California. It's a constitutional office established by the state constitution. And the district attorney has a responsibility of being the prosecutor of all felonies that occur within their particular county and all misdemeanors where there is no city prosecutor, which in Los Angeles County means the district attorney prosecutes misdemeanors in 78 cities and in all the unincorporated portions of the county. Los Angeles County, as you know, is the largest county population-wise in the United States with 10.4 million people.
We have a lot of crime lately, especially, well, there was always a lot of crime, but especially after the COVID started, for the past 2 years, a lot of break-ins to the stores and crime left and right. Why do we have such a, tremendous changes all of a sudden? And why is this okay? Because there's nothing much being done about the crime.
There are a number of factors that contributed to when crime is high in a society. Back about 15 years ago, for about almost a 10-year period, Los Angeles County's crime was at a 60-year low. Murders, rapes, robberies, burglaries, it was at a 60-year low, according to FBI statistics. Between 2000 and about 2010, Los Angeles County's crime rate was at a 60-year low. It had not been that low since the 1950s. Since then, it has steadily gone up, and especially after COVID, because of that and many other factors, crime is back to being at an all-time high throughout California, particularly in urban areas. And it has gone really far from, let's say, where it ordinarily occurs, and has spread throughout Los Angeles County into a variety of suburbs and other cities. Smash and grab robberies, where large groups of people come in and steal everything they can very quickly in a jewelry store or a department store. That is a new phenomenon. And I think a lot of that is the attitude of the criminal. They feel they can get away with it. And earlier in the decade, after 2010, that have contributed to what is now an out of control crime problem here in Los Angeles County, and to a certain extent, other urban areas. For example, the murder rate this year is twice as much as it was last year in terms of absolute numbers of murders. What's causing that? Usually the factors that cause murders to occur is you have individuals prone to commit murders out on the street. They're generally violent, and occasionally their violence leads to someone's death. Also, a number of murders occur in the context of an attempted robbery. robbery goes bad, they murder the victim. So I think when you have just an increasing crime rate in general, there's going to be the opportunity for people to kill other people. But the crime is definitely out of control in Los Angeles County. One of the factors certainly is the fact that we probably have the worst district attorney in Los Angeles County's history. And he is arguably the worst district attorney currently in the United States of America. His policies and the personnel he's brought in to lead the DA's office are substantial factors in the crime that's going on right now throughout Los Angeles County.
If I can ask you, who sets the policies? I mean, I'm sure it's more than one person.
Well, in this instance, the district attorney, the elected district attorney, possesses what is referred to in the law as prosecutorial discretion, which means that elected official, that constitutional officer, actually sets the policies and the parameters of how the resources to prosecute are allocated, and the policies within the law as to and the priorities in terms of which cases are to be prosecuted. That includes setting policies regarding sentencing, case settlement, all of which, and filing, what charges are to be filed, what enhancements are to be filed. George Gascon has really gone off the rails in terms of his exercise of prosecutorial discretion to minimize everything, lowest common denominator, no pursuit of the death penalty, no pursuit of life, of the possibility of parole, no violent juvenile murderers will ever go to adult court. Violent criminals will have the lowest possible bail set. Non-violent criminals will have no bail set, and on and on and on. Enhancements won't be filed. So if you use a gun, that enhancement's not going to be filed, which would cause additional time in a sentence. If someone suffers great bodily injury, that enhancement's not going to be filed, which would otherwise cause a longer time in terms of punishment. If you have violent priors, those aren't going to be filed and potentially add to the sentence of the criminal. So there's just an array of policies that Gascon has put in place to really minimize the impact of the law. He is ignoring substantial portions of the law that are designed to achieve public safety.
And why is that? Why did he
I
come up with different
I
policies?
really can't get into George Gascon's head. He is seems to be an advocate of the George Soros sort of approach to the criminal justice system, which very much is anti the current American justice system. Those people, and there's several of them throughout the United States, just call them George Soros elected DAs, who have adopted this philosophy that the system is corrupt. It's got to be changed. People really shouldn't go to prison. Maybe there shouldn't be any prisons. Law enforcement has to be defunded. And I think Gascon is in that ilk of that philosophy. Why he adopted it, you're gonna have to ask him, because it is crazy. He is creating victims with his policies and with the people he has surrounded himself with to execute his policies.
So what does the law enforcement think about it?
They hate him. They're disgusted by him. They feel that all their good work in terms of investigating crime, bringing criminals to justice, sometimes at great risk to themselves, is kind of wasted when you have a district attorney like George Gascon, who's not going to fully enforce the law.
There's just no respect to law enforcement.
Well, you're right in all respects. The respect for law enforcement has been greatly diminished in the last several years due to some of these radical elements, progressive elements, Black Lives Matter, and other groups that just don't have any real respect for law enforcement and what they're trying to accomplish and what their mission is. So you do have that element. And when you're in a profession like law enforcement, where you're proud of what you're doing, if people don't give you the sense of they support you, you walk away from it.
Yeah.
Who needs
They dedicate their life to their profession,
right?
their life, and
And
live
and
in
if
life.
they feel that they're not appreciated, oftentimes they say, "I don't need this," or they say, "I don't need to stay here in New York or Chicago or Los
LA.
Angeles or Portland or Seattle. I'm going to go someplace where they really respect me and respect what I'm trying to do for them."
So I like to think, I like to ask you, what do you think public should do besides
Well,
voting
in Los Angeles County, the public
to
should,
defend themselves, like gun laws?
well, the public generally doesn't decide gun laws, and gun laws aren't the problem. It's the criminals who use the guns. They're the ones who cause the problem with crimes involving guns. But that's not the issue. Right now, the issue is who is running the show. The most important thing the public can do in Los Angeles County right now is to recall George Gascon. There's no question that would be the biggest step towards restoring law enforcement's morale, achieving public safety, and getting rid of the violent criminals who right now are running amok in Los Angeles County and committing crimes with some abandon. You're having armed robberies occur in daylight in places like Beverly Hills, on Melrose, all over the county. Smash and grab robberies where they go in, they mace the store employees, and they steal as much as they can, beauty products, jewelry, and they feel they can get away with it. And the fact of the matter is,
Yeah.
they are getting away with it.
As a matter of fact, it was in San Diego one time. We went out to dinner, and right around the corner there was an ATM machine, and the bank got robbed while we were eating at the same time. Like
Well,
it was like watching a movie.
there was a situation on Cannon in Beverly Hills, one of the most significant streets in the heart of Beverly Hills. And there's some great restaurants on Cannon. One of the restaurants, a gang of thugs armed with a gun approached a man who was wearing a very expensive watch, and they tried to rob him of it. Their firearm discharged. One woman had her leg grazed. Another woman was knocked down and suffered a concussion. And it was all kind of videotape, all kind of videotape. Within 3 months, 3 months later, just down the street, this is Cannon, one of the most significant streets in Beverly Hills, an individual eating at a great restaurant went to make a phone call nearby. He was approached, attempted robbery, and he was shot. So this is Beverly Hills. And then you had that lovely woman, Mrs. Avant, in her home when a convicted violent felon entered her home to commit a home invasion robbery, and he gunned her down with an AK-47. That's what's happening. That was in Beverly Hills also. So you're seeing these very violent crimes occurring all over. And I think the public is now very aware that their district attorney is not very concerned about protecting them because he's not enforcing the law. Right now, Los Angeles County, you can basically say no one is safe. Everyone should be careful, cautious, and very aware of their surroundings, and very aware that the system has kind of failed them, is not protecting them. There are a lot of very violent criminals out there who seem to be undeterred, and you have law enforcement whose morale is so low that they are going to be less effective.
And there's a lot of juveniles committing
Yes,
crime, right?
there are. And the way the law is, very violent juvenile murderers can if they're 16 or 17 years of age, they can, after a court hearing, be transferred to adult court and get a meaningful sentence. Juvenile court does not allow for a meaningful sentence. There are no facilities to handle that kind of a violent juvenile who's committed murders, and sometimes more than one murder. And the state provides no real facilities for that. And state prison may be the only place to put those individuals for an appropriate amount of time. Because if you're a juvenile committed of, let's say, multiple murders, violent murders, murders in connection with a rape, home invasion, robbery, murder, by law, you cannot be held longer than age 25. So that's a very minimal sentence for having committed the ultimate crime of murder.
So should there be a purpose, the main purpose of the prison to be punishment or rehabilitation for the juveniles?
Well, the law says it should be both, and it should be both. Some individuals who are in a state prison setting are probably capable of being rehabilitated. And many are never going to be rehabilitated. They've had every chance in the world. Diversion from crime, processing within the juvenile system, probation, felony probation, programs, treatment, this and that. And they keep committing crimes. And some of them, after having multiple contacts with the justice system, felony contacts, go out and commit violent crimes. And then they should be punished. We should be protected from them. And we are if they're locked up. And we aren't if they're not locked up.
Yes. So there is a recall for District Attorney George Gascon. And can you tell us a little bit about it? I know we're going to place the link below. There's several of you who started this campaign.
Well, actually, the campaign to recall George Gascon was started by some very public safety minded individuals who actually started a Facebook page. And very quickly after George Gascon was elected and announced his policies, that Facebook page grew to about 40,000 individuals. And these were just public safety minded individuals. But the people who joined it first and foremost were the next of kin of murder victims whose cases were being dramatically altered by George Gascon's policies. And they are actually, I would say, the prime leaders of this effort. But many people have now joined in, contributing money, volunteering, and doing their best to get George Gascon recalled.
I see there's also, I have it right in front of me here, a mother of Julian Andrade, whose killers face a drastically reduced sentence due to George Gascon policies. Tanya Owen, former LA County Sheriff Deputy, and wife of Sergeant Steve Owens, who was murdered while on duty.
Yeah, and let me tell you about that murder. The person who murdered him was a parolee who was paroled from prison after having committed a violent robbery. He was committing a residential burglary with people inside the home. The sheriff's department was called. Sergeant Steve Owen was the first one on the scene, and this killer was armed and took Sir almost a pot shot, but hit him right here in the forehead and disabled him. Sergeant Steve Owen went down, and the perpetrator went up and shot him 3 more times in the face. And then he shot his badge, his star, off of his chest. That's the kind of murderer he was. Now, Jackie Lacey, when she was DA, filed all the appropriate charges, the prior convictions, the gun charge, other charges involving other attempted murders of other deputy sheriffs, special circumstance, and they were evaluating the case for the death penalty. When George Gascon got in, It was his goal to strip that case of everything. So it would just go down to being a regular murder, and he would be eligible for parole. Uh, some people say 20 years, some people say 12 years, but he would have been eligible for parole. This is a person who probably should be facing the death penalty or at least life without the possibility of parole. George Gascon's policy stripped that. So Tanya Owen, co-chair of the recall committee, went to work along with a lot of volunteer lawyers, including myself and others, and fought against it. And Gascon backed down on that case, but only because of the efforts of Tanya Owen and many other people. And so that case, luckily, turned out okay, but only because it had occurred before Gascon came into office, and he was going to be restricted by the court to accomplishing his policies. So that's what happened in that case.
This is so sad. And there's many, many more cases. We need to educate the public and let them know how they can help.
Well, yeah, and you know what, you're doing it here with this program. And many radio talk show hosts are doing the same thing. They're educating the public. It's a phenomenon. It's great. There's so much interest in this.
I'd like to ask you about human trafficking. What do you see as the U.S. role in combating human trafficking, and also known as modern day slavery?
Well, human trafficking has been a really a target of law enforcement for, I'd say, the last couple of decades. And it takes different forms. Oftentimes, the victims of human trafficking are minors, young women, but it takes other forms also. Right now, you have human trafficking occurring in the border states where the illegal immigration has reached all-time highs. You have it there. You actually have it in the Ukraine because of that war. Women oftentimes are forced into that horrible situation. So human trafficking is a phenomenon that's really worldwide, not just restricted to the United States. And in various places, it kind of takes different forms. But there are strict laws against it. They're not being enforced very too strictly by Gascon, but there are strict laws against human trafficking, and law enforcement historically has been very dedicated to fighting it. I would suggest that there are other ways to attack human trafficking. Right now, how about go after the pimps who reduce these women to their slaves through force, fear, drugs? Why not go after them? Make them pay a price. Take the pimps off the streets. Do something to help the victims of those kinds of crimes, and try and save them while punishing their perpetrators, their slaveholders, so to speak.
Thank you. What do you think is the most important challenge on U.S. security globally?
U.S. security globally? Wow. That's a good question. But from my perspective, I'm no expert in this stuff, but just from kind of watching TV and reading the papers, I would say the war in Ukraine presents the possibility for some real serious international problems. And that war itself is bad, but it could expand because Putin is such a megalomaniac, and to do what he's done almost brings back a sense of he's like a Hitler in terms of his mania and his desire to expand his holdings and to kill people randomly without any care in the world, just to accomplish his goals. That's a problem. The Middle East is always a problem in terms of international issues and problems. I see the immigration problem that's currently ongoing in the United States to be sort of a challenge to our country. If you don't have secure borders, you're not really a nation. That's what they say. and I tend to agree with that concept. There has to be a lawful way for people to apply for citizenship, apply for immigration, go through the process, be evaluated. But just having people flooding across, well, a lot of those people are criminals. They are importing dangerous drugs such as fentanyl. Last year, the United States of America suffered the most number of drug overdoses in its history. It goes up almost geometrically every year because of the availability of fentanyl and the fact that many people who like to use drugs take something they think is something else, like oxycodone, and it's really fentanyl. Then they die. So it's just I think that's a real challenge because people are dying. It's a form of murder. It's a form of homicide, and it's really a threat to our country because that, in many cases, really good people die. They shouldn't die. They're victims of their own weaknesses, maybe, but particularly victims of those who would prey upon their weaknesses.
Do you think that maybe legalize the type of drugs will kind of reduce the crime? I mean, we had it before, we legalized weed.
Well, the fact of the matter is, drugs are pretty well legalized in California. Hard drugs right now are only misdemeanors. There aren't felonies like they used to be. So they've almost effectively been legalized. Marijuana already is legalized, that's fine. But all these hard drugs, cocaine, PCP, heroin, fentanyl, those are misdemeanors. There's no serious consequence whatsoever to possessing those drugs. They're effectively legalized. But when you look at San Francisco, where that city has adopted sort of a policy of facilitating drug use, you see basically a city being diminished, deteriorating, being a place where people don't want to go or be, and they want to move out, and they don't want to come there as a tourist because of what? So many drug addicts spending their life essentially being drug addicts.
What do you think is the most effective way to deal with low-level drug offenders?
Rehabilitation through effective programs, but with the oversight of the court. It's sort of a carrot and stick approach. You really don't want to incarcerate them if at all possible, but the threat of incarceration has to be there for many individuals to accomplish the goal of getting off drugs.
How would you like to see our country spending the budget on law enforcement support and the system?
I think that's better left to the legislators and the individual city and county leaders, because they have to decide what is their problem. I don't think there's one size fits all. Law enforcement in New York is far different than law enforcement in Orange County, or law enforcement in the Central Valley of California, law enforcement in Nebraska. The local officials, assuming they're operating with good faith and in the interest of their constituents, should figure that out. They should make the priorities. If it's a drug problem in their community, they can prioritize that. If it's violent crime, they can prioritize that. If it's gangs, they can come up with solutions there. It really depends upon the nature of the crime problem, and then the local officials who are responsible, district attorneys, police officers, sheriffs, probation departments, and others should be involved with their political leaders or elected leaders in coming up with appropriate, customized solutions to their crime problem.
How important is it for public to join law enforcement events?
Well, I think the public should be involved more than just joining law enforcement. They have to be good citizens. They have to be responsible in terms of reporting crime if they see it, being witnesses in court if it comes to that. Um, and generally, maybe the most important thing they can do is elect officials that really prioritize public safety. Right now in California, we have a state legislature that it definitely seems that public safety is not high on their list of priorities. Maybe when things get really, really bad, maybe they'll wake up. But right now, our legislature is pretty much not contributing any solutions at all. Mostly they're part of the problem.
During your years as a district attorney, what are you most proud of?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. When I was district attorney, there was a phenomenon where illegal aliens, people in this country illegally, were committing very serious crimes, oftentimes murder. And because of a decision by the Mexican Supreme Court, the United States was unable to extradite those murderers back to the United States for prosecution and punishment. I worked along with law enforcement for 5 years to change the law so that would we could ultimately bring them back to the United States. We had one case in particular. It was the execution murder of a deputy sheriff by an individual who, after he shot the deputy sheriff here in Temple City, was in Mexico within 5 hours. It took us about 4.5 years to eventually bring him back to justice, but we did. We had to change laws and get out there in the public and talk about the problem, raise awareness. We had a website, and it ended up, well, we were able to catch quite a few individuals who had fled to Mexico after committing very serious murders here. And because we did that, that benefited the entire country. So other states that had murders committed by people in the country illegally, from whatever country, they now had the opportunity and the ability to find those individuals, if they were in a country with an extradition treaty, to have them arrested and brought back to the United States. So it really was, it solved a national problem, but only because of the efforts of Los Angeles County. Another thing I was particularly proud of is Los Angeles County DA's office and the Los Angeles Police Department led the way in causing California to allow a certain DNA technique called partial match familial search. And basically, in a nutshell, if there's an unknown assailant, in this case, it was the Grim Sleeper case, who we knew from DNA had murdered 11 women and attempted to murder a 12th, and probably was good for another 25 murders. That technique is what captured him. And it's very simple. You take the DNA sample, it's analyzed and profiled, and compare it with the DNA profiles that are in the state's database. And if that individual is not there, and the Grim Sleeper wasn't, then you see if there's any relative of that assailant based upon DNA. That's called the partial match. And once you have a partial match, you look at that, that the relatives of the individual who was the partial match, and try and figure out who it was that the DNA can lead to. In this case, it was a guy named Lonnie Franklin Jr., and he killed all those women. And we believe sincerely about 25. After raping them, he strangled them, he shot them, he left them like trash all over. There's that case became the blueprint, sort of, and the technique that the Sacramento DA and 5 other district attorneys, not Los Angeles County, but 5 other district attorneys, Orange County, Sacramento, and 2 or 3 others, where the individual known as the Golden State Killer was eventually identified. And he was a former police officer who had raped scores of women, murdered many people in their homes, and he was finally captured. And they did it by taking that sample of the unknown suspect, the Golden State Killer, and they tried it against the state criminal database, all felon DNA database. They had no luck. Then they tried it against publicly available DNA databases such as 21andMe and all that stuff, and they got a hit, and they were able to figure out where he lived, and they captured him, and he's prosecuted in Sacramento County. He's now pled guilty to everything. He's very close to death anyway, but he was convicted of everything, all the murders that he committed. But they would have not done that in Sacramento County, Orange County, and all the rest of these counties if it weren't for the fact that Los Angeles County had sort of achieved the technique and perfected it in the Grim Sleeper case back when I was DA. So I was real proud of that too. That took a real team effort between DNA people and law enforcement and victims groups. And of course, our office played a major role. So I was real proud of that too.
What a great story. Well, thank you for sharing. This is great. It's almost like, it sounds like a movie, you know? I know you have a company.
Yeah,
And,
basically I'm a sole practitioner law firm, but on almost every case I get involved with, it involves a lot of investigation. So I bring in investigators, different kinds of investigators based upon the case. I work with a wide variety of other lawyers. Sometimes I'm brought into their case to help out, consult. Sometimes I put together the team of other lawyers, sort of
very
an
interesting.
eclectic practice, which I enjoy very much. I'm learning a lot and accomplishing a lot, I think.
Yeah. How strict should be the law with people drink and drive?
I go along with the proposal that it should be very strict, especially in terms of helping the individual who can be helped by requiring their participation in various programs, and they exist and are mandated by law. And I think that's an important way to go, because our jails are so crowded. You can't really effectively punish anyone by putting them in jail. You put someone in jail for 180 days, so that's the sentence, he'll be out in 3 days. Put someone in jail for a year, if that's the sentence, he'll be out in 10 days. So you really have to be creative and find other ways to, based upon the crime, help that individual deal with whatever issues are causing them to commit the crime. So you have a certain approach for people who are driving under the influence. That's a certain category, and that's a lot of people. That's the only offense they ever get arrested for or convicted of, is driving under the influence. But there's a lot of it. And then you have people with the drug addiction. Well, they need another sort of program for them to help them get over that. So you have to sort of look at each problem and try and come up with the best solution you can within the resources that are available. And oftentimes there aren't enough resources available.
There's also quite a bit of changes since George Gascon is the DA, the bail law,
Right?
right?
Yeah, basically he's taken the position that bail should never be requested by the prosecution in any misdemeanor case or in any non-violent felony. And this is sort of under the radar, but because he doesn't file sentencing enhancements, the bail for certain very, very, very violent crimes is the lowest level, because he won't file the enhancements that might otherwise increase the bail, such as prior convictions, use of a gun, doing a crime at the behest of a gang. All of those special enhancements add potential time and therefore increase the bail amount recommended by the Superior Court. I think George Gascon should have kept his nose out of bail. If you read the penal code, that's primarily a judicial function. The district attorney is there to represent the people in the context of the bail law, which is Penal Code 1275. And he's just arbitrarily putting his 2 cents worth in, saying, well, I don't believe in bail, so I'm not gonna let my DAs argue for bail. I'm gonna prohibit them from arguing for bail. I'm gonna greatly limit them from arguing for bail. Well, yeah, I'm gonna have these directives that eliminate enhancements. So we're gonna have the lowest possible bail. he's a joke. And this is contributing to the lack of public safety right now. That policy is very dangerous, very dangerous.
Lack of public safety.
Yeah, lack of public safety. It hampers public safety. They really let a lot of people, 76,000 out of the state prisons. That was sort of under Governor Newsom. They shifted a lot of prisoners down to the county jail level who otherwise would be in state prison or sentenced to state prison. Prop 57 greatly reduced potential sentences when someone becomes eligible for parole. So yeah, there's a whole lot of things kind of came together,
Mhm.
and a lot of people who would otherwise be in are out, and that is probably the main factor in the exploding crime rate.
Should the death penalty exist as punishment for murder or terrorism?
Well, in California, there is a law that allows the death penalty for acts of mass destruction and terrorist acts that result in death. California law, if Osama bin Laden killed 3,000 people here, he could, under the law, be prosecuted and the death penalty could be sought, but not in Los Angeles County because George Gascon prohibits seeking the death penalty, even though it's the law.
Well, thank you so much. It was a true honor to have you on the show, and I'm looking forward to have you again to get more education.
Well, good luck, and maybe I'll come up with some ideas.
Thank you so much again. You have a
Right.
great evening.